The Veryovkina Cave is a place of chilling silence and danger, nestled in the Gagra mountain range of Abkhazia, Georgia. Stretching to a staggering depth of 7,257 feet, it is one of the most mysterious and perilous caves in the world. It is a labyrinth of jagged rock formations, vast underground chambers and freezing pools of water, an abyss where few have dared to venture. To understand the cave's true enormity, imagine descending into the earth, deeper than most mountains rise, where the air grows thin, and the light of day is nothing more than a memory. For Sergey Kiv, an experienced caver from Russia, the Veryovkina Cave was both a challenge and an escape. Having explored many of the world's deepest caves, Sergey's thirst for adventure had become more than just a hobby, it had become an obsession, a way to reclaim something he had lost. Something deep within himself. An urge to find purpose in the shadows, to confront the darkness of both the earth and his soul. He had always been a man of quiet intensity, a figure whose resolve was as unyielding as the caves he explored. Yet, beneath his hardened exterior, Sergey had been struggling for months with an overwhelming sense of existential emptiness. Life had started to feel like an endless cycle of monotony. Each day, he went through the motions, pretending that everything was fine, while silently grappling with a sense of isolation that gnawed at him like a constant shadow. Caving for Sergey was no longer merely an adventure. It was a desperate attempt to escape the intangible ache inside him. The deeper he descended into caves, the further he felt he was from his own existential crisis. It was as though, by venturing into the earth's darkest corners, he might find clarity, meaning, or perhaps a path back to a sense of connection to life itself. But deep down, Sergey knew that no amount of physical challenge could ever truly fill the void inside him. The idea of seeking solace within the cave was a comforting but false belief. On October 31, 2020, Sergey shared a final conversation with his wife before leaving. He had packed his bags the night before, not bothering to mention the full details of his plans. He told her only that he was headed for the mountains in search of something personal, something to help him find the answers he needed. His wife, who had long learned to accept his solo adventures, nodded with a mixture of trust and apprehension. She had noticed the subtle changes in his behavior over the last few weeks, the moments of melancholy, the lingering silences, but said nothing. She wished him well and reminded him to be careful. Sergey assured her that it would only be a short trip, that he would return soon, just as he always did after his previous expeditions. There was no hint of what was truly at stake in his words. No trace of the internal battle he was fighting. It was a normal goodbye, one that would fade into the haze of everyday life. Little did she know this would be their last conversation. On November 1st, Sergey set out for the caves. He made the long drive from Russia into the mountains of Abkhazia, Georgia, alone with only the distant hum of his car's engine as company. His thoughts were clouded, a mixture of the anxiety he felt about the journey ahead and the faint hope that the cave might offer him the answers he so desperately craved. The Veryovkina Cave was not a place for the faint of heart. It was a place of shadows, of isolation, and of danger, everything Sergey had come to believe would somehow help him face his own inner darkness. Upon arrival, he stood before the cave's entrance, a jagged maw in the earth. At first glance, it seemed almost deceptively mundane. The entrance, framed by twisted trees and rocks, looked like any other fissure in the mountain. But Sergey knew better. He had heard the stories from other cavers, the ones who had attempted to explore its depths, only to retreat in fear or worse, never return at all. He knew the cave had claimed its victims, silent, unknown, and forgotten. Yet, Sergey felt neither fear nor hesitation. Instead, he felt an odd sense of calm, as if the cave had been waiting for him all along. He gathered his gear, ropes, headlamp, climbing harness, and began the descent. The air grew cooler as he descended into the unknown, the first 1,300 feet a maze of narrow, sharp passages and vertical drops that required every ounce of strength and precision. Sergey crawled through tight fissures, gripped the cold rock with his gloved hands, and pressed forward, feeling the weight of both the cave and his own emotional burden bearing down on him. For hours he made his way deeper into the cave. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional drip of water from the cavernous ceiling. The further he went, the more the cave seemed to close in around him, as though it was swallowing him whole. But still Sergey pressed on. He was determined to reach the heart of the cave, to the deepest chambers where no man had ever ventured before. At 1,247 feet, Sergey reached the first camp, a makeshift shelter left by other cavers. He checked his phone, studying the maps he had downloaded and the notes from previous expeditions. The plan had been to descend to the 4,430-foot mark, but something kept him from going further just yet. The fatigue of the journey weighed heavily on him and he decided to rest. Hours turned into a day and then another as Sergey remained in the camp, recovering both physically and mentally. He lingered in the cold, knowing he was not quite ready to move forward, but unable to explain why. On November 5th, Sergey made the decision to push onward. The journey took him deeper still, to the next camp at 600 meters below the surface. By now he was exhausted, his body bruised, his mind clouded with exhaustion and doubt. But he pressed on, driven by something intangible that he couldn't name. When he reached the next camp, he found more supplies, extra food, gas for his stove, even some equipment that he wasn't sure he could trust. It seemed like the universe was trying to provide him with the tools to succeed, but Sergey remained unconvinced that the cave cared for him. The cold, biting his skin, reminded him of his isolation. He was alone. Days passed. Sergey rested, ate, and reflected on his journey thus far. The deeper he went, the more the cave felt like a prison, a claustrophobic cell that refused to let him go. At times, he wondered whether this was how his life had always felt. A journey that never truly ended, a cycle of endless searching for something he could never quite reach. Even though the cave had offered him the illusion of adventure, he could not escape the nagging sense that he was merely running away from himself. At Camp 1000, located over 3,200 feet below the surface, Sergey found more supplies but was also faced with a new set of obstacles. The temperature had plummeted, and his clothes were soaked through with freezing water. The cold became unbearable, and Sergey realized that he had left behind key equipment, wetsuits, stirrups, ropes, necessary for the next phase of the journey. He was unprepared for the harsh realities of the cave. He had thought the physical challenge would be the hardest part, but it became clear that the real challenge was something much darker, facing the truth about himself, in the quiet and isolation of the abyss. Still, Sergey pressed on, desperately clinging to the hope that he could make it to the next camp, the 4,430-foot mark. But each foot downward seemed to deepen his despair. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Hypothermia set in, and Sergey found himself unable to move his limbs or operate his equipment. His breaths became shallow, his fingers numb, his body weakening with every passing second. The cave, once a symbol of adventure, had become a tomb. At 3,600 feet, Sergey realized that he could no longer continue. He had reached the edge of his endurance, physically, mentally, and emotionally. His body trembled uncontrollably, his vision blurred, and his strength left him. As he hung suspended in the depths of the cave, frozen by the cold, he closed his eyes, surrendering to the darkness that had claimed him. For Sergey, the cave had become his final destination, a place where the journey, both physical and emotional, had come to an end. His wife, back home in Russia, never received the message she had expected. She waited for him as she always did, but as the days turned into weeks, worry began to creep in. After months of silence, she reported him missing. And so began a search that would last for nearly 9 months, an agonizing wait that seemed to stretch on forever. It wasn't until August 3, 2021, that a team of cavers finally discovered the rope Sergey had left behind. The search was long and difficult, with each step taking them deeper into the cavernous void. On August 12, the team found Sergey's body, still suspended in the cold darkness, the phone he had taken with him still in his grasp. His remains were brought to the surface piece by piece, the task of dismembering his body an agonizing decision made out of necessity to avoid contaminating the local water supply. On August 16, the recovery was complete. Sergey's body was returned home and his wife was notified. The journey, both for Sergey and for those who loved him, had come to a tragic and sorrowful end. Sergey's story highlights the hidden dangers of the world's deepest caves and the incredible lengths to which a person will go in the pursuit of adventure. His journey, determination, and the tragic ending remind us how sometimes the pursuit of the unknown can lead to heartbreaking consequences. Yet, these stories also reflect the survival instinct and the strength of the human spirit. If you're interested in more deep, survival, and emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, please give this video a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We're looking forward to hearing from you.